Okay, so this is a somatic inquiry. All of it is for you to just take as an offering. You do whatever you want. You can be on or off camera. It's all fine. Um, and the biggest ask is that you really take care of your own body, your own system, listening to yourself and responding from the intelligence and the wisdom of your highest self, whatever that means to you, however that lands in your body. And I was thinking a lot about what to do today. And I think I want to start with the developmental patterns that our nervous system goes through when we're born. And we're just going to move with them or not move. You can just work them in stillness or in any way that feels good to you. Because I've been spending a lot of time working on down regulating the nervous system. It's nice to have some idea what's going on sort of energetically with your nervous system as we're moving and as we choose different ways of moving. So we'll just start with the first one, which is breath support. And I'm going to have a hand on my chest and a hand on my belly. There are many ways that you could organize your breathing, and I am not going to tell you how to do it, except to feel that as you inhale, that there's a sense of growing, and as you exhale, there's a sense of shrinking. Or so we're getting bigger on the inhale, a little smaller on the exhale as we fill up with the volume of air expanding, and as we come back into ourselves, just coming back into ourselves. So feeling into that without any need to breathe in any certain way. There's many possibilities. So feel into it and feel what feels good. And if it feels stressful to even tune into your breath, then maybe just feel your skin under your hands or feel the movement of your body under your hands. Eyes can be open or closed. Also, you can imagine that whether you try to or not, your body is going to breathe. So it's not like you have to put a lot of effort into your breathing. Feeling how it feels to be in your body right now, to be you in this moment in time, and coming to that with as much non judgment and equanimity as possible. So, underlying everything for the rest of our lives will be breath support. And we're not just breathing in our lungs, our cells are breathing too. The oxygen is moving through our body, nourishing our body. The arterial flow moving out to the edges of the capillaries where it turns around and comes back in as venous flow. So, where that shift is happening. So that there's this bigger sense of growing and shrinking of the blood flow moving with the oxygenation of our body moving out and then coming back and returning to the heart. So just integrating that idea if that feels good. These interwoven systems that keep us alive, our life support on that breath level. And imagining our cells breathing in the same way. They're taking in the oxygen and then releasing the CO2 when the time comes. And there's nothing that we need to do to make that happen. We don't need to think about it. We don't need to force it. We can just allow it. It's happening in our system all the time as long as we're alive. Nothing to do, no extra effort required. And as we're breathing, we're sharing the air of the planet with everybody else, with the plants, our interwoven relationship with the plants, with people, with creatures, with the atmosphere. And we're allowed to breathe as much as we need to breathe. Breathe as deeply or as shallowly as feels good. Sometimes just taking the breath deep into my body, but not taking a whole lot of breath feels really good and helps me calm down and down regulate. So maybe sometimes trying that breath of depth without massive amounts of volume and just feeling into what that feels like. Our body has a natural response to take in a big, deep inhalation about once every 5 minutes. And that reopens all the little air sacs, the alveoli that might have not been working so hard when we're breathing more shallowly or more lightly. So allowing ourselves to take in the deep breath whenever necessary, but also just breathe shallow or breathe light, deep and light, if that feels good. And we're going to add the next pattern in, which is this idea of core distal, so center to edge. The radiation out. I sort of talked about it in the blood flow moving out to our limbs and then returning through the veins. It's happening with our organs, it's happening with our whole body, but this idea of radiating out to the edges and coming back in. So there's this radiation from center out to the edge and then returning in. And it's happening at this deep fluid level all the time, but we can also bring it into our awareness with movement, just inviting in this growing and shrinking out to the edges of our body to come back in. It could just be in your imagination, or you can do it in movement. And this could be big in movement or small in movement. Micro movement is great, macro movement, great, whatever feels good to you. Just radiating out to the edges of your body and then coming back in with your awareness so that we could also think of this coming from our nervous system, the bulb of our brain down through our spinal cord, radiating out through our arms and legs like branches, and then information returns back up. So finding that navel radiation away from center and coming back in. Core distal patterning, core distal, the far edges of our body, our fingers and our toes, the tip of our head, the distal parts, imagining we have a tail radiating out. So tuning into this in any way, it doesn't have to be symmetrical. It can just move in any way that feels good. And maybe you can feel your awareness moving out to those edges and then coming back into center. Maybe your sensation of awareness is sort of global, or maybe it's just really in one area, like spotlit here or spotlit there. Let the awareness be whatever it is. Let it shine in any way that's interesting for you. And inviting in your curiosity. So, this is like we're adventuring through our body, through the realms, requesting in there to find out whatever it is to find out. We don't know what. Without a plan or without too much of a plan, there's a little bit of a plan. Opening up and coming back into ourselves with this core distal relationship. If we were a starfish, we'd have a really strong core distal connection, or a jellyfish, right? There's that navel radiation. Jellyfish just have surface edge, right? And then maybe they have some tendrils. So inviting that imagery into your movement, which is bringing up the next pattern, which is head tail. So the relationship of your head to your tail being a spinal creature and a creature with this head bulb nervous system routing down through the spaces of in between your vertebrae. Right in the center of your vertebrae is a hole going down where your spinal cord moves. So we can imagine that there's like a river of our spine moving in from our head to our tail. Then maybe it's radiating out to the edges. We're not taking anything offline. We're just focusing on this head tail relationship. All the possibilities of movement in the head tail relationship, inviting micro movement into your central channel And maybe that turns into macro movement. Maybe it wants to go out in your limbs. All of it is allowed. And you could be laying down to do this also. It doesn't have to be seated. You could also be standing up. Each relationship to gravity and each relationship to space is going to have different information. So feeling into that fluidity, the river of your spine, the connection of the top of your head down out through your tail, imagining you have a big expansive tail. So it's beyond just the physical body, this relationship. And just seeing what's possible in there. If you had just landed in this body for the first time and you're discovering the movement of the central channel, the movement of your spine, how would you learn how to do that? So, curiosity, exploration, inviting in ripples, waves, and spirals. Yeah, for me, it's become very interesting to feel the weight of my head, the weight of my cranium in relationship to the rest of my body. As you're in the exploration, inviting any tension that you come across, if it's ready to soften and melt away, just inviting it to melt away. So the movement with the awareness just increases the energetic flow through your body so that you can start to release any little tensions or holding patterns. And also imagine that your cushy marshmallowy discs are just bolstering up a little bit more through this movement, readjusting, renegotiating the inner space. And also imagining that inside your brain and your spinal cord are suspended within your body. They're also suspended within fluid, right? The cerebrospinal fluid is moving around in there, nourishing, bringing oxygen, nourishment, and eliminating waste, filtering through our head tail, through our spine, around our brain, and around our spinal cord. So there's this internal sense of suspension and internal support with the fluid, right? It is suspended within the fluid system of our cerebrospinal fluid, our blood, all the stuff is suspending us within. So we have the bone support of our cranium and our spine, and the rest of our rib cage, pelvis, all of that is connected into that head tail connection. All that cartilaginous support. And within that, even within the bone, even within the cartilage, there's a sense of movement potential, spacious potential. Tuning into that. Which is going to bring us into a bigger pattern, which is more like an obvious pattern of movement, which is our upper versus our lower. So head tail kind of creates an upper versus lower relationship, but invite in the sort of push pull patterning of upper versus lower. If you see babies start to get that push pull where they're starting to learn to arch their back, right? So we're getting these basic fundamental patterns into our body. Upper versus lower, there's arching and curling. Cat cow is an upper versus lower pattern. And you may notice that side side or some other pattern wants to come in for a few minutes. Try to stick it just with upper, lower, upper versus lower. So it's not just in the vertical. We can also have some forward backwardness. It could be a sagittal plane movement in our upper versus lower. Like I can lengthen up and I can curl down, still working with that pattern. If it feels good to go bigger, go for it. You can like push with your feet, reach with your hands. If I was on my belly, it would be a very different look than this, or even on all fours. Coming into upper versus lower patterning, also known as homologous, upper versus lower. And letting yourself play within that space. And it might be very minimal. It might just be feeling into it, feeling that lengthening and shortening or arching and curling. Or it might be big. Yeah, I think I'm going to actually come off of the ball and down onto the floor to get into this a bit more. Yeah, so upper versus lower can be very push-pulley here. You can see a lot of the initial starting movements of yoga in sun salutations and cat-cow, child's pose, downward dog. All of that is push-pull, upper versus lower. Of course, a baby can't do those things yet, but this is the advanced adult version. Seeing if you can find different ways to move through it, rippling, waving. Could also be on your belly. Imagining, oh, I just added some side movement. Yeah, probably we've done enough upper versus lower. Let's start to add the side. So one side versus the other. So like right side versus left side, homolateral movement, right? Rolling from side to side is working with that homolateral movement. You could be doing it seated, just playing with right versus left, with where one side moves and then the other side moves. Or it could just be in your imagination. If we're more in stillness, that's fine. If you think of even like how lizards move, there's sometimes upper versus lower with right versus left. So if I'm seated, I can move one side, move the other, but really sticking with this sideness. Feeling into the width of your body, feeling into that side reach space, right versus left. Homolateral movement, as if you've got a line down the middle and one side moves or the other side moves. Just feeling into that pattern. And you can feel the sort of tensions and counter tensions of what's going on with one side versus the other, or the stability mobility balance as we have to stabilize something in order to really mobilize another thing. Although I have to say, my favorite thing and one of the most recuperative things for me is just rolling from one side to the other, pouring myself across the floor in this body half of right versus left. And for me, this type of rolling is the most nourishing for my hips and back. When I've been doing a lot of walking or dancing or anything like that, I kind of need to get down and spread across the floor, letting the fascia, muscles, tissues just renegotiate the inner space. But this could be very small. It could just be even head from side to side. You could do that to find the right versus left, with your legs ideally going in the same way. So we're going to go to the most advanced human pattern, which is contralateral crossbody. Whenever we're walking, running, some forms of swimming, potentially biking, depending on how much push-pull you're getting across your body. But finding this pattern of contralateral movement, cross-body movement, most advanced for our nervous system. And because the right side of our brain is controlling the left side of our body, and the left side of our brain is controlling the right side of our body, when our body does these contralateral patterns, when we cross over, It adds extra information through the corpus callosum, right? That the center of the brain where all the information is going back and forth. And this is also a good way for us to, you can even just do these types of crosses to organize our brains, organize ourselves by coming into these crossed patterns where the patterns are spiraling and returning to each other. So it's like a spiraling loop. But if you go for like a long walk or a run, usually you can feel the reset that it does for your nervous system. So contralateral movement also would be crawling, opposite arm to leg in any way. You can take these patterns and let them be much more curious, see what's going on just by using the opposite arm to leg. And sometimes in an exploration, you'll find, oh, I really need the recuperation of a different pattern, right? Maybe I just need to come back to upper versus lower. I just need to come back to side to side. So I'm gonna just give us music and let us play. You've learned all the patterns. You can just let your body do whatever it wants to do for the rest of this. So you're not forcing it to be in a pattern, just exploring what feels interesting. And noticing, oh, this pattern feels good. Or not even noticing and just being with your awareness in your body. So for this part of the class with music, let yourself just explore without having to know anything so that you can be in the uncertainty and in the curiosity. This music is Ambient Fields by Jeff Gersh, and this is album number 3, song number 1. Let the music wash over you, wash through you, adding to the vibration. And inviting the patterns to just play in any way. They can mix and match, and basically they do. They're mix and matching all the time. Giving your body and your system the permission and the freedom to unwind in any way that it needs to. When we let our body move through these different patterns, so that, let's say in a workout or in a movement class or just in your daily life where you cycle through an upper versus lower, a side versus side, a cross body movement, you're letting the tissue, the fascia, and the nervous system like have this internal massage against each other so that we're getting more three-dimensional movement, which is the juju. It is the good stuff. And it's one reason why, like, being in repetitive movement patterns that don't change can be really taxing on the body. So we want to offer these other patterns as means of recuperation, and these mixes of the patterns where it's free flow, anything goes. You're just listening into what feels good and interesting. And trusting that your body also knows on a very deep level what is good for you. So allowing yourself to receive the nourishment of being in this relationship with your nervous system, down regulating, allowing movement, and working with these patterns or these ideas. And we could spend whole days on any one pattern. But it might not feel that good, right? If you don't add the other patterns. Although the breath support, the core distal, navel radiation, away from center, back to center, like that can always be something worth exploring. Head-tail connection. And we could say that all of what we're doing is just building a relationship with ourselves, with our body, with our cells, and with movement. With listening to our bodies, not objectifying them, but participating with them in the dynamic nature of being, right? The flow of being. Invite your thinking mind and your intellect to take a back seat to sensation and just curiosity, like the curiosity of movement, not thinking curiosity so much as sensing curiosity. If we had to learn our whole world just through sensation, not through ideas, how would we do that? Being with the living experience of your body without the need to judge or fix. Allowing yourself to be in open awareness. If you meet with resistance, welcome it in. And it's not to say that we're eradicating judgment. If judgment's there, let it be there. Just don't give it so much of your focus. Whenever those types of things arise, is see if you can come into more fine-tuned perceptual awareness. Like, what does it feel like to be on the floor? Or what does it feel like to be on your chair? What does it feel like to have hands and feet? What can they do? The tissue of our body responds better to allowing and offering than to forcing. If somebody tries to force you to do something, well, for me, if someone tries to force me to do something, I resist, right? So we don't want to force our bodies in a way that then our bodies is in a resistance like fight, but allow, offer, open. And receive the information. Sometimes we just need to, go deeper in and quiet down more, and sometimes we need to reach out into space, into the spaciousness of being. And the experience is mercurial. Nothing to hold on to there. Let it move through and with you. Allowing whatever holding patterns of who you think you are, who you have to be in the world to just soften a little bit. What if you had 2% less tension in your body? Less tension around who you are. Certainly less tension on how you should be. Let go of as much of that as possible. I'm just going to stop the music and give us a couple of minutes just to process the processing. Sometimes stuff gets dislodged, and then you just want to be gentle with yourself to allow it to process through, composting, reabsorbing, whatever it needs to do, moving through your body. And you can process in stillness or in movement, whatever feels good to you. I'm going to bring us back and stop recording. If you need to take longer and just lay on the floor or do your thing, whatever it is, feel free to just blink out. You don't need to